unfortunate that I have to open up this meeting with condolences.
That's the city's correction commissioner, once again acknowledging another detainee has died in custody.
That situation is under investigation. I know it will not be enough, but I offer my condolences to Mr. Muhammad's families and his loved ones.
Elijah Muhammad died on Sunday. Immediately, an officer was fired after the incident. Little is known about why or what happened. Muhammad's lawyer tells New York One the fatality was a suspected drug overdose. It's the 10th death of a detainee in custody or recently released from custody so far this year. For some, it's an indication the city's jails are still in chaos. For one, on Tuesday, members of the city's jails oversight board said the correction department was keeping almost 24 detainees locked in cells for 23 hours a day, akin to the version of solitary confinement the city was supposed to do away with.
No one seems to know how is it that young adults finish up in these awful spaces, 23 hours a day, confined behind plexiglass without no human contact at all, no programming, and actually no clarity on how they can get out or what they need to get out of those punitive segregation spaces. Last Friday I was there, I met with a young person that actually completely decompensated and began talking about suicide. And many of them have been there for months.
The Department of Corrections says these are units they plan to close down, but they're open for detainees who are involved in a lot of violent incidents.
These are very complex problems that have existed over decades here.
Other board members continued to raise other concerns like violence in city jails and a pattern of altering documents.
We remain concerned about the violence levels and whether access to health care is adequate during overly long stays at intake. We have referred 3 recent violent incidents to the Department for Internal Investigation, as well as troubling pattern of document alteration regarding lengths of stay at intake.
Details of those particular incidents were not immediately available. Courtney Gross, New York One.
Fed up and demanding action. Local corrections officers are fed up and demanding action from state lawmakers. Guards from Coxsackie Correctional rallied outside their union headquarters on Hackett Boulevard in Albany this morning. They said their officers are just understaffed, working very long hours in violent conditions. The union says it's a statewide issue that's only getting worse since lawmakers passed the HALT Act, which restricts solitary confinement and makes for more interaction between the officers and dangerous criminals.
It keeps me up at night. Yeah, the issues that our members are dealing with, not just at Coxsackie, but across the state of New York. It's a very violent atmosphere right now. It's very tumultuous. There's no discipline for egregious criminal activity inside our correctional facilities, and our members are targets, and that's how they feel.
The union president wants lawmakers who support the HALT Act to come spend some time in the prison and experience firsthand what the officers have to deal with.
Yo, you're broken! Hello!
Yo, under arrest!
I'm recording! He's a bitch, I know he is.
No, keep recording.
I'm recording.
Yo, keep recording,
I hope
man.
your camera's on because you did
Yo,
it the last
sister,
time.
loosen up. Loosen up.
Loosen up. Please do.
Sister, relax.
Please.
Yo, you's a hoe,
That's
bro.
a girl, too, by the way.
You's a fucking hoe, man.
That's a girl, by the way.
Yo,
And I got you on camera. I hope you got me on
camera.
camera.
You's a whole bitch. I'm gonna back up. Don't touch me.
I hope you got this.
Yeah, you scared.
I hope you got this on camera. Yeah, you need to back up.
You keep running up.
You need to back up, mister. You need to back
Keep
up.
recording me.
You need to back up. You need to back up. You need to back up. That's a female. That's a female. Hope your camera's on. That's a female. That's a fucking female. That's a fucking female. You a bitch, nigga. Outside that uniform, you know what you are. You know what you are. You know exactly what you are. Y'all know who the fuck y'all are.
You had your gun. You had your hand on the gun.
Y'all know exactly who the fuck y'all are.
Slammed on the floor.
You know exactly who you are.
Whole bitch. Whole entire bitch.
Y'all probably just graduated from high school.
You're scared. You're not from around.
You're fucking nervous. That's crazy.
And you scared of black.
I just told him what he did at the water with the other dyke girls. They antagonize dyke girls, not guys. They don't antagonize guys. Y'all antagonize dyke girls. Girls, fucking girls. A fucking girl. A fucking girl. A fucking girl, nigga. A fucking girl. A fucking
For no reason.
female.
After she's on the floor.
That's a female.
And you standing over there with your
That's a
hand on the
fucking
gun the whole time.
That's a fucking
Bitch,
female.
like I said. Like I said, bitch. Bitch, yeah. Get right, bitch. Bitch. Yeah, bitch.
They attacking that white girl. They don't attack that. They attacking that girl. Look, girl. My name is girl bag and that's it. A fucking girl. A fucking girl. A fucking girl. A fucking girl. Don't come my way. Because if I give you my information, you're going to be activated. No. Don't come my way. Don't come my way. It's crazy. Don't come my way. Yo. God, I don't see that cool. My uncle going to get his ass. It doesn't matter. I remember this. I remember y'all said if you lucky I got my cup turned on. Y'all know this is your ass. I just showed you. You was in it. Yes, you was. Yes, I was. Better than you, bro. That's a 49cc.
Yo, sis, calm down and you calm down.
Y'all fucking up.
They like beating up girls.
They getting paid for this?
Calm the fuck down.
Who's your wife? Put my hat on my head, Carly. I'm doing deliveries to get jewelry. Yeah, y'all niggas can't even work around here because y'all niggas. Because of y'all niggas. But I had the license. I told you that. Well, I had it. It doesn't matter. I had it. I had it. I'm not letting you take my life. I'm working. No, it isn't working. Dumbass. But you're dumbass. You're dumbass. You're so mad. I can't wait to send my feet. Y'all should have pulled us over on the bus. All right, don't touch us. Don't touch us. We just said that. Don't
Yeah,
touch
can you
us.
get another officer to
Don't
touch her?
Don't touch
He
us.
just slammed on the floor. Spanish people, and if you're scared, go to somewhere fucking else.
That was it.
Where you don't gotta be scared of women on bikes.
On bikes.
Two
You didn't
lesbian
even-
gay
you could've
chicks, you
pulled
never
us
let your
over
hand
the
off
right
the
way. We went in the store.
What the
and you
fuck,
came out
bro?
with a sneaky
Lesbian
picture.
gay chicks, she look like I swear to
The
you.
bike was on
I
fire.
understand
We
your
should wait
job.
get on the bike and pull us
Understand
over on the bike.
difficulty in it. It's a lot of asshole criminals. But you gotta know your fucking neighborhood. You can't just come here and be scared of somebody and slam women on the ground. It's fucking crazy, dog.
Well, one female, man. All she was doing getting overeats.
And then him too is scared. Like, there's a lot of people like, look, y'all. It's not a black or white thing. It's about being in this neighborhood. Since they got on the scene, it's two females. He's like this with his hand on his gun, him with the hand on the taser. She's wrong. She took off on the bike. They caught her. They caught her, my man.
Thank you. Thank you. They mean that. I'm not trying to
Let me walk. I'm going to tell you. Listen, this is wrong.
He's always doing that.
They're doing his job. He slammed her like a grown fucking man on the ground. He picked up, he could have shoved it down. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. God damn, I'm just. You're right, you're right. I'm sorry. Have a blessed one. God bless.
On behalf of all young black people who've seen the video, I was wrong because you got to be careful of what you do and how you speak out here because we're all at danger. But we also got to step up when we see being done wrong. I definitely should have delegated it better. Most of the time I'm calm because most of the time when it happens, it's usually all males involved.
We have Sean Drumgold, who was wrongfully convicted of murder and released 14 years later, now says he has died. Drumgold spent 14 years behind bars in the 1988 deadly shooting of 12-year-old Darlene Moore in Roxbury. He was released in 2003 when a key witness admitted lying in that case. Drumgold sued the city and was ultimately awarded a $5 million settlement. His family posted to social media saying he died on Monday.
This funeral of Lonnie Hamilton happened 6 months after he died and was buried. That's because when the 22-year-old committed suicide in a state prison near Syracuse, no one told his family.
Ultimately buried him up in Marcy Correctional Facility without ever letting anybody know.
The family found out 2 months after the fact. They eventually had his body exhumed to hold their own funeral. Now, 6 years later, a state judge awarded Lonnie Hamilton's family $1.5 million. Judge Francis Collins ruling Corrections and Community Supervision, which runs state prisons, and the Office of Mental Health were negligent in Hamilton's death and did not afford his family a proper funeral. In his decision, the judge points out that Hamilton's prison record, quote, describes an individual who needs or may need psychiatric treatment for a major mental disorder and requires housing in a facility with full-time Office of Mental Health staff. Hamilton was sentenced to 2 to 6 years for a robbery. When he died, he was in the special housing unit at Marcy in solitary confinement. Other inmates testified he was being mistreated and threatened to kill himself, and corrections officers encouraged him to do it.
Save your breath. Ain't you about to kill yourself? They kept telling me, ain't you gonna kill yourself? Like,
that was corroborated with 2 other individuals that were also incarcerated and in cells next to him that also testified to that same exact fact. And then about 5 other individuals who provided written statements, all saying the same.
Court documents say the same week he killed himself, he was taken off of suicide watch by mental health workers. Just minutes before he hung himself with a sheet, a corrections officer reported seeing him standing on his bed, but did not tell him to get down. The judge found plenty of documentation that Hamilton was a threat to himself. Quote, Lonnie previously attempted suicide by hanging and felt he had nothing to look forward to. His family hadn't spoken to him in a few months, and when they did a prisoner search online, they were stunned it said he was deceased. Prison officials say they could not locate his family despite his father still living at the same address where Hamilton was arrested. They're outraged no one was fired for his death. The family now has a federal court case against individual corrections officers for violating the constitutional rights of the 22-year-old. Dean Meminger, New York 1.
When I got out of prison, all I had was a stack of legal papers and a sweatsuit. My daughter handed me a flat thing as we were leaving the prison, and I didn't know other than to just put it in my lap. And she says, well, go ahead and talk. And I said, we are talking. And she had to tell me that is a telephone. A telephone didn't look like that in 2002 when I was arrested. A lot of friends of mine knew that I loved to ride a motorcycle, so they all started reaching out to everybody they knew to see if they could find a deal on a motorcycle that I could afford.
He's been incarcerated for 20 years, and he went on a cross-country trip. He went to hug all of his supporters.
I got to ride the whole length of Route 66 from here in Chicago all the way to Barstow, California. I rode across deserts, mountains. I rode 300 miles down the Pacific Coast Highway in the Big Sur. I rode over mountains in Washington State that unfortunately I found they had snow at the top. And, I rode through Yellowstone. I rode through the whole west of the United States. It was beautiful.
Craig was the second prisoner I ever worked with. I was a writer who was writing about cannabis, and like most people, I was unaware there were people serving life sentences for marijuana, and that just haunted me. I couldn't not do something about it. It's comfortable to think that people like Craig were anomalies, maybe those 1 or 2 poor souls that got caught in the wheels of justice, but what I learned is it's not an anomaly, it's the way things are regularly done.
The name of the federal charge was conspiring to possess with the intent to distribute marijuana. In my case, it carried a sentence of from 0 to life imprisonment. And since the discretion is up to the judge, although I had no prior convictions and nobody was hurt, I was nevertheless sentenced to life imprisonment. The statute that I'm charged under and the sentence that I have is exactly the same as that of El Chapo Guzman, the head of the Sinaloa cartel.
Craig's was really one of the most egregious stories for a few reasons. He didn't use marijuana. He was never caught with marijuana. He was a third-party vendor.
All I see is memories here of all the work I did here and all the years that my business has operated out of here. Well, the name of my original business was Cabin Back Pickup Truck Camper Tops. And we built camper tops for the back of pickups. But unfortunately, I did some work directly for a company that leased trailers. And this company would take the trailers down to Mexico, hollow out the lot walls, fill the walls with marijuana, drive those trucks through the Border Patrol. I didn't know what they were doing. They drove the trucks all the way up here 1,000 or so miles away for me to rebuild them back to their original shape. They saw my participation in their offense by rebuilding the trailers when they were done with them. They saw that as me agreeing to their trafficking of marijuana. I was imprisoned from March 23rd, 2002. So just shy of 19 years. The way a federal life sentence works, there is no possibility of parole, there is no early release. But many of the violent prisoners, bank robbers and that sort, were serving 3 and 4 and 5 year sentences. A person that murdered people, he came in a year after me and he went home 3 years ago.
Marijuana fans are celebrating in Denver, with voters in Colorado and Washington state the first ever to make it legal for adults to possess and sell small amounts of pot for recreational use.
And I started this over 10 years ago. They would watch stories on the news about cannabis legalization. I would send photos because we would have a booth at events like the High Times Cannabis Cup, and they were all very hopeful because they were sure help was on the way. It has to be, you know. And now a decade later, they're more feeling like they've been totally forgotten.
Under President Obama, he did a special initiative called the Clemency Project, and I went fully through that program. His last year in office, I was denied clemency. I'd actually tried under President Bush in 2008, I believe. That one was denied rather quickly. I was released from prison on January 20th, 2021, President Trump's last half day in office.
And it was to the last minute. I mean, Craig had already gone to bed. He didn't think it was going to happen.
At 5 minutes after midnight, I talked on the phone with Ivanka Trump, and she told me that her father had commuted my sentence to time served.
As a felon, depending on where you live, you may or may not have the right to vote. You don't have the right to have a firearm, things like that. If you have a pardon, it's like it never happened and all those rights are restored.
It's extremely rare. Right now, there's 17,400 petitions sitting at the Office of Pardon Attorney filed by there's about 130,000 federal prisoners right now. All those petitions are sitting there, and I think it's a safe bet that way less than 1% of them will ever be granted.
Clemency and a commutation of sentence are the same thing. So what that means is they've wiped out your sentence or reduced your sentence in some cases.
Clemency is a power only held by the president. And to be honest, I received my clemency because of my connections, which does fill me with guilt.
Craig has been working hard since he got out. You know, a lot of prisoners say that they're going to reach back in after they get out, and it never happens.
Remember, most of the people in prisons are not lifers like me. Most of them will be released to the society. And many of them come to me, the convictions date all the way back to the 1970s and 1980s. Americans don't even really have an awareness of what's going on in our criminal justice system.
We have to admit we got this wrong, and it should have never been illegal in the first place, so let's fix it.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the